Well, good morning. It's Grandpa Ricky again. I woke up this morning thinking, my God, I'm one of the luckiest people alive. I have friends. I've developed a bravery to suffer, to remember all the stuff that happened to me as a kid and that happened to my ancestors that were painful, and and that I was frightened about. And all of these things are becoming tools, and they're making my life easier. And I hope this video makes your life easier. Uh, what I'd like to do today is to take you on a journey, and to one of the places that's deep inside me, because I spent many years. And so I invite you to imagine it's your strongest healing tool. Um, would like you to join me in an adventure. Uh, so imagine that you somehow find your way to having an airplane ticket to Toronto from wherever you are. And I meet you at the airport, and we drive for 2 hours in my old van. I drive a van with 400,000 miles on it, and I just keep putting money into it. It's a VW van. And as I pick you up, you notice that we've got skis and snowshoes and supplies in a toboggan in the van. And we drive pretty much in silence from this big, busy, modern airport. You kind of almost don't know what city you're in. They're all the same, kind of. But when we get outside, it's snowing, and the roads are tricky, and we can't drive very fast. And we drive north out of Toronto, 100 some odd miles. And then at a certain point, we turn off the big highway, and we go onto a side road, and we drive on the side road for 2 or 3 miles, and then the road stops. It's not plowed any further. And we park the van, and we get out, and we put on our ski boots and our mucklucks, which are like moccasins, and maybe you choose to use snowshoes. And we load all the food and everything into a toboggan, and it's at night. So we put on these headlights. Only these are kind of special headlights. They're designed for hunting, and they have a big battery. And we put on. They light up everything. They're very powerful. They're very old. Made by a company called Rayovac. I don't even know if they're still in business or not. And then we load the toboggans up. You've got a toboggan, I've got a toboggan. And we tie down the things, and my old dog Ezra's with us. His name was Ezra Wellesley Pound. And Ezra was a big dog. Labrador and Pinscher and German Shepherd. And we start going through the fresh snow. And nobody else has been there, so it's kind of slow going, but we're not in any hurry. It's very late at night. There's a tiny sliver of moon, and the stars are really twinkling. There's enough energy and reflection in the snow that it's brighter than we thought. You can even turn the headlight off and just look up at the sky and see these stars twinkling in the cold. And we're dressed warm enough. and the air is really crisp, and the snow is crunchy. And we start off, and you don't know where you're going, but I do. I've been there before. And we go along through the trees. It's a road in the summertime, but in the wintertime, it's just a wide clearing covered with snow, and we go, and we have to stop very often to rest. We're not in a hurry, and we've got water, and you've got a backpack, and I've got a backpack. And in our packs are another battery and another flashlight and a plastic tip for skis in case the ski breaks. You kind of clamp it on. And we've got some food, an apple, some carrots. And we go along, and it's pretty quiet. And the dog's running in front of us. And the dog kind of circles back. He goes out in a big circle in front of us, and then comes close to us, and then goes behind us and goes back out in a circle, and he's checking. He's checking to make sure we're okay. And in the distance, you can hear a train going by because we're coming up to a train track. We can't see it, but we can hear it. And it's big, and it's long, and it's got a lot of cars on it, and it's going places and doing things. And it's complicated, but where we are, it's pretty simple. It's the skis, the snowshoes, cold. And we're not dressed too heavily because we're going to be sweating. And we work and pull the toboggans for a while and then have a rest and some water. And we go along until we come to the train tracks. And there's a beautiful tree, big, huge fir tree. And there isn't much snow underneath it. And there's a log there, so we sit down on the log and we have some more water, and we eat the apple. And when we're ready, we keep going. There's some juniper berries. They make gin out of it, or they used to. And we nibble some juniper berries, and they've got lots of vitamin C in them, lots of seeds, and they're gritty. And we keep going, and then we go at a certain point, and I know where it is. We go even off this snow-covered road, and there's a tiny path. And the tiny path leads to a cabin that was built by friends and my partner and I. And it's 18 feet wide and 32 feet long. And it's 2 stories high. And we eventually come to it, and we see it standing there in this little bit of moonlight, and our flashlights are looking, and you can see that it's got two stovepipes. And it's got a combination lock. It's a Braille combination lock on it. And I go and I click, and I'm listening to the clicks. And I open the door, and it's brown. And it's an old door. The whole place is made of scrap materials. And we go inside, and it's really cold. Oh, my boy, is it cold. And I go over to the place where there's a jar of matches, and I light a match. And then we can really see that there are coal oil lamps. And we light the coal oil lamps, and I show you how to light them, and there's maybe 10 of them. So the place gets filled up with coal oil lamps. It's a soft light. And there are 2 stoves, and one is a cook stove, a Finlay cook stove. And there's wood there, and there's kindling, and there's birch bark, and some old newspapers, and we make a fire. And you make the fire. I show you how to do it, and you make the fire in this little tiny pot-bellied stove. And pretty soon we can hear the crackling of the wood burning, and there's a little bit of smoke as the stovepipes heat up. And these stovepipes are arranged so they go up to the ceiling and through the floor, and then there's a second floor up there. And these stovepipes, they go a long way, and so the stovepipes are at the back of the cabin. And there are windows all around. There are windows on 4 sides, which is not very usual. And we get a little bit comfortable, and the temperature starts going up, and we're still dressed in our skiing clothes, and we're a little bit sweaty. And there's some coats there, so we put on some coats to keep warm while the place heats up. And then we climb up this ladder, and it's a steep ladder, stairs like this. It was built by this guy from Quebec. He was up helping, and all of the wood in this place is recycled wood. The idea was in 1966 or 67, a group of us bought a little tiny piece of land. Well, no, it wasn't, but I'll tell you about that later. And so upstairs there are some bunk beds, and it's all very rough cut, and there are big trunks up there. And we open up the trunks, and there's the smell of cedar. And the cedar's in there to keep the mice and the moths away from the bedding. And there are mattresses hanging from the ceiling, and we take the mattresses down. They're hanging there so the mice are less likely to get in them. And we lay the mats down on these bed frames, and then we take out the blankets, lots and lots and lots of blankets and pillows, and there are some fresh pillowcases. So there are always fresh pillowcases, and I brought some up in my pack to replace the ones we're going to use and take back to the city when we're finished. And then we go back downstairs as the place is heating up, and there's an old ice box, kind of set into the wall a little bit, and you go outside, and I tell you to look for and brush the snow away, and on the porch, the step before you come into the door, there are some containers of frozen water. And so we put the frozen water into the icebox, and then we load the food into the icebox. And it's getting warmer and warmer, so we can take off the coat and hang it back up. And there's a little tiny place where you can go and you can wash your hands. And so there are plastic bags hanging over the stoves. And the plastic bags have a little shower spout on them. And the water eventually starts to thaw in those things. So we've got water to clean up in. And in the toboggans, we packed containers of water, gallons of water. And in the morning, we'll go down to the lake that's, 1,000 yards from the cabin. And we'll chop a hole in the ice, and we'll get water. And then we'll carry the water back to the cabin. And so we have a little snack, and the place is warm enough now. And we go and we set the fires so that they'll burn as long as they can. And you go up to your little sleeping place, and I go up to my little sleeping place, and we've agreed to not hurt each other and to be kind with one another, and to not talk too much. It's not a wild time. It's just an ordinary time, and we're stepping back into time. There's no electricity. There's no running water. Things aren't fancy. It's more like it's really simple. The toilet is a bucket, and that's just for when you can't get out to this outhouse, which is a little tiny house with with a seat in it and a hole cut in the seat, and you do your bowel movements into this pit, and then there's a collection of sawdust and wood ashes, and that gets dumped into the pit, so it doesn't smell. And if you have to pee, then you pee outside if you can, and if you can't, then you put in more sawdust and pee into the sawdust. Because it's the pee that really starts to stink after a while if you don't put wood ashes on top of the cold old ones, not burning one. And the thing that really stands out is the eeriness of the snow on this big swamp that is out. The cabin is kind of up on a bit of a hill, and then down there's this big swamp, and so it's flat, and in the little bit of moonlight and in the starlight you can see how big it is and the silhouette of the trees and things. And so you blow out your coal oil lamp, and I blow out mine, and we go to sleep, and we have an amazing sleep because it's silent. And silence is something that some people have no idea what it is. And then we go to dreamland, and we let the trees talk to us. There are birch trees around this cabin, and that's a tree that is like white. And it's an amazing, amazing tree. Like all trees are pretty amazing when you learn to talk to them. And they don't speak English. They speak images and feelings. And we wake up in the morning and cook some breakfast. Before you came, I asked you, what's your favorite food? What do you like? You like coffee or tea in the morning? Or orange juice even? We brought some orange juice. And so we cook breakfast. And the place smells good, and the fire's crackling. Everything's done over a wood stove, although there is a little stove that you can pump up pressure, and it's good for heating coffee, but it stinks a little bit. And we sit there and we kind of just are amazed that we feel so warm, and you're wearing moccasins because there's moccasins there for people. And then we decide, what are we going to do today? And so we go out and we go down to the lake with the axe and the buckets and the toboggan. And the buckets have a lid on them. And we chop and chop and chop, and we chop this big hole in the ice. Not so big, but big enough. And you're worried about falling through the ice until you see that the ice is about 2 feet thick. It's so thick. And sometimes it cracks. I don't know why, but it just gives these crack sounds. And then the water comes up, and then it freezes too. And we take the water back to the cabin, and we freshen up the water supply, and we check to see that there's enough antifreeze in this fire extinguisher that you pump, because if it was filled with water, then it would freeze and you couldn't use it if there was a fire. So you have to be careful. And so we go out and we're just looking at the forest. The silent, it's so silent, and we see tracks. We see wolf tracks, and we see badger tracks, and we see a moose track, because they live around there. And you can see that there's beaver lodges, and at a certain point at the very end of the swamp, there's no ice, and that's because the water's running there all the time. And we see where the wolves have been out trying to get into the beavers in these their houses are made of piles of sticks. And I cut myself on my knife as I'm peeling cutting an apple, and it's interesting to see that I had bandages in my bag, because when you're up there in the wilderness, you're miles away from any hospital or anything else. So you've got to be prepared. You got to kind of go ahead into the future and say, hey, we're going to need some bandages. And we go back to the cabin and have a late lunch and just sit around and read some books and talk and tell stories to one another about what made our lives easier. They're the most important ones. It's not just complaining about the crap that happened to us. It's like, well, how did we get over it? It's like, yeah, life is filled with suffering, but so what? That's life. How do we keep going? How do we help one another? And so after supper, it's dark again. It gets dark really quickly, and we go outside, and we decide to go for a night ski without toboggans. And so we ski down onto the swamp, and we hear wolves in the distance, and the stars are twinkling, and the snow is crunchy. And Ezra is getting kind of excited, and I sing to him, Moon River, Moon River. And he starts to howl. Oh, and the wolves start to howl back. Ooh. So we go looking for the wolves. I know we're not going to find them, but it's interesting to pick up their tracks and then to figure out, well, how fresh is the track? And so you really get to know, because it's always sprinkling a little bit of snow. And so the tracks that are, you can see that it's a wolf print, and a wolf paw in the wintertime is big. They're like snowshoes. And so we start following these wolves, and they take us up into the tracks take us up into the forest, and we're having to climb up hills and stuff like not hills, but you're going uphill. And then it's always tough coming downhill on cross-country skis, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And we come to the lake where we cut the hole. And we go out on the lake, and we're skiing on this flat lake, and it's just lovely. And then there's a loud crack. Oh, and we can see the water coming up. And so my skis get all clogged up with ice, and my feet get wet. And this is important. You got to do something fast. So, and Ezra's feet, his feet got ice too. So we had to stop and pick the ice out of the pads of his feet. And one of his feet was bleeding a bit. And you could see as he stepped, there'd be a bit of blood in the snow. And so we headed back to the cabin, and it wasn't too far away, so we made it. And the funny thing is, when you get wet in the wintertime, it's very important to stay calm. Like it's important to stay calm all the time. And the ice on the outside of my socks and shoes, it froze, and the inside was still kind of warm. It was like being in a wetsuit, so the water's cold, and you got water next to your skin, but it's not as cold as going to kill you or drive you crazy. And we get back to the cabin and put the fire up again. Oh, and by the way, you actually volunteered to get up in the night if it got too cold and to start the fires again. And so the fires had gone out, and we built the fires up again, and there was still water in these containers. And so you went in and we brought a big bucket from outside, a big wash tub, and then there's this kind of like shower-like curtain in this little cubby hole of a bathroom, and you had a warm hot shower, and after you were finished, I had one too, and we wiped away all the sweat and stuff, and boy, were we hungry. Oh, from all that exercise and all that fresh air and the silence, you know, because it's so different when things are that silent. It's the sound of silence. Somebody made a song about it. And so that kind of life goes on. The coal oil lamps, the soft light, the kind of old furniture. The table is an old furniture, an old table, round tabletop, put on top of a big spool of that they used for wires, and everything was kind of hokey, I guess you'd say, but it was good enough. And we heated up water to wash the dishes, and we emptied out the buckets, the poo buckets into the outhouse, and put some more stuff in there. And then the next day it was just, life went on. I don't know how many days we were up there. We kind of lost track of time. And it was time then to go back. You had a plane to catch. And so we loaded up the toboggans and we sweated our way back to the car. And there was some worry that the battery was going to be dead. But we had in the van, the old van, we had one of those things that stores electricity. So we had to put the cables out and, you know, get this old battery going. But the van got started, and we eventually drove back, and somebody plowed the road up to where the car was parked. We had to shovel it out. We'd left the shovel leaning up against the door. So we shoveled the car, and we put these special things that were made in, I don't know, Norway or something. And they were really weird looking things, and they clamped onto the tire so that each tire had 4 things clamped around it, and that allowed us to drive on the really slippy, icy parts. And so we drove back to Toronto, and I took you to the airport, and you had to wait in the airport for quite a while. And you were a little bit when you get old, you get mucus a lot. And luckily enough, there's a shower in most airports, and if you ask around and you are nice and funny and curious and stuff like that, they'll let you go in and have a shower. But you can't say, I need a shower. You gotta kind of cozy people up and let them know that you're a good person, and then that's how you make friends, with curiosity and humor and lightness and looking like, yeah, you're okay, you're getting by. So thank you for coming on this journey. I've really appreciated it. I go back to this place so often in my mind, in my imagination, and I talk to the birch trees, and you know, Ezra's been dead now for about 30 or 40 years, but he's still with me. He's one of my spirit guides. He's looking out for me, and maybe someday I'll tell a story about Ezra Wellesley Pound, because he was purchased at Wellesley Pound. So thank you very much for listening. I hope this has made your life easier in some way. And I encourage you, tell your stories. Your stories are more important than you know, especially the stories about how you got through rough times. And I got through rough times by by joining up with other people so we could buy a little bit of land so we could build little cabins like this. And I was lucky because in those days you could build things and not have to worry about building permits or anything like that. And in lots of ways, this shack now is it's different. I mean, people keep adding to it and making it easier for them, and I'm really happy for them. So, thank you for coming with me to the swamp. How do I shut this off?